Hello folks, how you doing? Uh, subscribe. Subscribe. I appreciate your subscriptions very much. And comment too. Well, I'm open to comments, that's for sure. I want to talk about Paradise Lost. People might say, well, was there ever a paradise? Well, according to ancient scriptures, it was. There was a paradise, you know. So we're concerned with how it was lost. How did people lose the paradise? Because there was a paradise in faraway times. The people experienced paradise. We're going to talk about why they experienced it and what people do today to regain that paradise. You know, so it takes us back, and obviously, to the ancient folks, like the first humans. Well, it turns out that the first humans didn't have a cerebral cortex. That is the top part of the brain. Sometimes they call it the neocortex. The neocortex, meaning the new cortex, or the new brain, because it was the latest part of the brain to develop. So the first humans didn't have it. It hadn't developed yet. See, he had the lower part of the brain. He had the imagination and memory and so forth and so on. Oh, he had enough brain to survive, that's for sure, because we're here. So now those folks didn't have any of the stressors that are due to the cerebral cortex, the thinking brain. They weren't thinking. They were knowing. Okay? And because they didn't have this stress, you see, they didn't have the discomfort that comes with the stress. They didn't have the confusion, the uncertainty. And they didn't have what humans of the present generation go through because they didn't have a cerebral cortex, you see. The thinking brain is referred to in some of the scripts as the devil's workshop, because it can cause so much trouble when it's not controlled, you see. And it seems that controlling it is not that easy, okay? So they didn't have the stressors. Their concerns, their main concerns was food and drink. That was it. With the first humans, reproduction wasn't a concern. They did reproduce, you see. According to the mythology, the female could reproduce alone. She did it herself. She had both male and female reproductive hormones. She did it alone. That reduced stress too, I imagine, So because they was free of stress, free of such problems, they were able to experience paradise, a paradisical state of mind. They wasn't worried about anything. They wasn't worried about food because it was everywhere. They were hunters and gatherers. They didn't have to worry about the grocery store running out of food. It was right there for them. So they didn't have any worries. You see, and they didn't have a cerebral cortex that would bring worries down on them by thinking of a whole lot of different things that were really unimportant, not having anything to do with survival. So they wasn't worried about anything. And that's the paradise part, you see. And the question was, how do humans of the present generation regain that paradisical state? How do they go back there? You see? Well, this is what, a lot of groups, religions, I should say, talk about. Well, they talk about heaven. It's paradise. That would be paradise, too. They say, well, yeah, you go to heaven when you die. But what death are they talking about? Are they talking about dying to the things of this earth? Or are they talking about the physical body going to the grave? You know? Well, when the physical body goes to the grave, maybe that will become heaven. But we're concerned about what's going on in this life. We'll get to the next one later. But can we get to the idea of going back to this heaven, this paradise? Well, if the ancient folks didn't have the cerebral cortex, then what people today must do is put their cerebral cortex to sleep. They don't want to go through surgery and have it removed. That's not going to work right, because still people of today have to deal with the events of the day, and that requires a cerebral cortex. Yeah. The way we live today requires a cerebral cortex in order to deal with the events of life and the people as an event. So we must put the cerebral cortex to sleep if we're going to go back. And that's what they do with their various cults and religions, etc. Putting the cerebral cortex to sleep. They're doing various certain exercises. By stopping the thinking process. It's called no things. No things mean no thinking. No interruptions from the thinking world. Folks out there who's doing all the thinking. No interruption. We close things off. And keep our energy within ourselves. Thinking burns a lot of energy. Can even raise blood pressure. So anyway, they shut down the cerebral cortex. No thinking goes on because the ancient humans didn't think. They didn't have a cerebral cortex. And in this state, a person is able to experience the same paradise that the ancient ancestors experienced. But the human today can't stay in that state for a long time because they usually have to come out of it so he can deal with the everyday factors. You see? But even if he goes into that state for 15 minutes, it would be a blessing. Humans do enter that state, okay? They don't realize it. But still, they do enter that state. It can be entered when you are deep sleep, or it can be entered while a person is awake. You can be sitting in a chair and enter such a state. He could be driving his car. And the miracle about this driving a car is that when a person is doing something, some activity, and he goes into that state, guess what? He does whatever he's doing perfectly. If he's driving the car, he'll stay in his lane. If he drives 10 miles down the road, he'll stay in his lane. He might miss his exit, though. He might miss the exit, but he will stay in his lane. Even if a jogger is jogging and enter the state, which some joggers do, if he's jogging down the path, he will stay on that path. He won't jog off the road to run into a tree or something. So it is still a waking state. Okay? Because our ancestors were awoke. They weren't asleep. They were awoke. So when we enter that state here and now, in the present generation, we can enter that state without being asleep. We'd be awake. Okay, folks. Have a good one and subscribe, and I'll be back with you later with another video. Have a good day and bye.